With the incredible success of the first Super Mario Bros. Game literally bringing video games right out of the grave, Nintendo obviously had to make another game, right? Well, they didn't immediately start to make a sequel to the game. Instead, they were busy making ports of the game to arcades. Arcade cabinets were still pretty popular at the time, and Nintendo wanted to make sure they could get a wider market. So for people who didn't have enough money to buy the console and the game, they made the arcade game, calling it Versus Super Mario Bros. Although this game wasn't exactly the same as its NES counterpart. Nintendo made the game much more difficult than the original just so it could eat up people's quarters. While developing this version of the game, the level designers and playtesters were surprised with how much fun they were having while playing the more challenging levels of the game. So this is how development of the sequel to Super Mario Bros. Had started. This game was made to be heavily difficult to new players and challenging to people who had breezed through the original game. They knew that newcomers to the series would have trouble, so they labeled the game's box art as for super players. They had all known that this game was extremely difficult, and so they marketed the game as such. They did not hide the game's difficulty at all. The commercials would highlight this with the people playing the game just yelling because of how difficult it was.
スーパーマリオブラザーズ2はさすがディスクで面白い。へったくそ。ムカッとくるけど。やればやるほどディスクシステム。
The difficulty of the game wasn't actually an issue until they were trying to bring it over to America, that is. Okay. So, when evaluating the game to release outside of Japan, Nintendo of America didn't believe they should release it in the US just yet, due to the video game market still recovering after the video game crash of 1983, and the difficulty of the game being aggravating, to say the least. The evaluator of the game, Howard Phillips, stated that, "As I continued to play, I found that Super Mario Bros. 2 asked me again and again to take a leap of faith, and each of those leaps resulted in my immediate death. This was not a fun game to play, it was punishment. Undeserved punishment. I put down my controller, astonished that Mr. Miyamoto had chosen to design such a painful game." So the game was never released in America. The game was truly only for the super players, which America was not, quite obviously. So is the game as bad as Howard Phillips leads it on to be? Well, we'll see, as today will be the day I play through and review Super Mario Bros. 2, to see if the game is actually as difficult and as bad as people make it out to be. So this game may or may not have been one of the first games I ever played on my Wii. That's a lie, but it was one of the first Mario games I ever played, and honestly, I enjoyed this game a whole lot more than the original. I had the first 4 Super Mario Bros. Games on the Wii since I was a Wii kid. The Wii is where I hold the most fond memories for almost every Mario game I've ever played. Almost every Mario game I've ever played was from the Wii or the Wii U. I didn't actually play these games on the Wii, I played them on the Wii U from the Wii menu. So most of my memories are from here, and this game is no exception. I remember loving this game so much more than the original game. The original was super boring and way too easy for me, but this game was interesting. It had much different level designs than the original, but it still had the DNA from the first game. I would still rather play Mario 3 or Mario World, obviously, but this game was definitely intriguing to me. Much more than the first game, especially since we also had the Mario All-Stars game on the Wii, and there were 2 Super Mario Bros. 2 games on there. And the one I was familiar with had the subtitle of Lost Levels. The original one on the Wii didn't have this subtitle, so why did this one? The Super Mario Bros. 2 situation was always interesting to me, even before I was trying to figure out more about video games and how they work and such. At the time, I just thought this was kind of odd, and I still enjoyed the game, but it did change my perspective on the American sequel to the original game. One that I will always just call Super Mario USA. and it's why I don't put the subtitle of The Lost Levels at the end of the game's name. It is the original sequel to the game. It has the most in common with the original game and every game that came after it. I'll talk more about the disappointment I had with Super Mario USA when I talk about that game in its video. But for now, I just want to gush about how absolutely great this game truly is, and how wrong everyone else is. Of course, I'm joking, this game still isn't perfect, and I'll get into the bad things that this game does later, but in general, I feel that this game's pure hate towards it is a bit over-exaggerated. So let's gush about it a bit before getting into the bad stuff about it. First things first, the visuals of the game are a lot more pleasing than the original. This game's aesthetic still feels like the original Super Mario Bros., but mixed up a little bit to add its own flair to it, so that it's still recognizable as a different game. Personally, I like it a bit more than the original. It pops out a lot more, and it just feels like there's a lot more going on with it. In this game, they lean more heavily into the mushroom style. There are more mushroom platforms, even though they aren't the same as in the first game. There are mushrooms in the foreground of a lot of levels now, and in general, it just feels more like you are in a new kingdom compared to the first game. A lot of the things in the levels have faces now too, which is fun. Everything looks a lot more friendly, even though it's clearly not. Also, Luigi! You can actually play as Luigi in this game instead of having him as just player 2. You can now play the game all the way through as Luigi. He even controls differently than Mario. He jumps a lot higher than Mario, but as a contradiction, he is ice level the player. He controls much more slippery than Mario, who already has very slippery controls. Honestly, even with the slip and slide controls of Luigi, it's still kinda better to play as him. There are a lot of jumps in this game where, as Mario, you would have to make a jump like this. As Luigi, those jumps are so much easier. There are a lot of those jumps in this game as well, so Luigi makes the game easier overall, and faster to play through. The slippery controls are really annoying though, but not as bad as you would expect. However, Mario's controls are still a lot better. I'd say switch between them if you were planning on playing the game more than once, undoubtedly. This does remind me, the 2-player mode in this game, there is none. I forgot to talk about this in the Mario 1 video because it really doesn't matter. The 2-player mode was just kinda there. It didn't really work well either, since it took until you die to switch to the next player, so you could just beat the entire game in one run without losing a single life, and the second player wouldn't even get a shot to do anything at all. So I think getting rid of it was a good idea for this game. Even though players would definitely have died more than in the first game, it just wouldn't be needed. The game wasn't groundbreaking because of its 2-player mode, it was groundbreaking because of how fun it was. So why not forego the 2-player mode in favor for more fun and challenging levels? That makes a lot more sense. Anyway it goes, the 2-player mode was not needed and probably wouldn't have been that fun in the first place. Speaking of fun, what made the first game so successful? The fun and consumer level designs of the game. That's what. So, thinking of it that way, they must have kept the same logic behind the second game, right? Nope. The level designs themselves kind of range. Some are actually really incredible and interesting and really fun, while others feel like an unfinished Mario Maker level. At least it's not like the first game though, where most of the levels are just kind of uninteresting. These levels are either really interesting or really bad. No real in between. Case in point, World 8. 8-1 is one of the worst levels in the game. You have to jump between pits to hit flying Koopas on the head and bounce from them to the next platform in quick succession. It's awful. Not even to mention the wind mechanics in this level. This mechanic is one of the very few things added to the game, and it's easily the worst thing to come from it. It's kind of hard to explain how it works, but basically it pushes you. And the level designs pretty much want you to jump while it pushes you to make it past gaps you can't make it past normally. Sounds fine, right? No, mainly because of the controls of the game. They're the same as the first games, which is bad. I didn't complain too much about them in the first video because they aren't really that bad in the first game, since the game design is much more catered to those controls. Whereas in this game, it is very clearly not. you have to make such precise jumps in this game, and mixed with the pushing from the wind, you can very easily overshoot or undershoot the jump by a lot. It's really hard to clearly explain it, but it feels like the wind is delayed. You have to get a head start to actually make it far at all with your jump. Again, hard to explain, but it's really annoying anytime it pops up. Anyway, 8.1, awful and not fun to play through. Checks out. However, 8.2 is a different story. First off, it completely changes aesthetic, which really threw me off for a moment. Second off, it's actually an interesting level and not really that annoying to play through. You can't just make it to the end of the level either. There's nothing there except a pipe that takes you earlier in the level. If you couldn't tell, that wasn't the end of the level. Instead, to make it to the end, you have to hit this block and make it grow a vine to take you to the clouds. And then you end the level up there. When I first played through this game, I was not expecting that at all. And honestly, I was actually kind of impressed. At this point in the game, I would have expected the game to have shown all its cards, but nope. This game played a new one at the very end. It only got better from there. 8.3 takes place in the sky for starters, and it's actually a really fun level. No really annoying jumps until like the very end, but that's fine compared to half of the other levels. Not much else to really add, it's just a really fun level. Then there's 8.4, the last level of the main game. It's not very fun. Nothing I haven't said before, annoying jumps, boring level design. The only real thing of note here is this fake Bowser that just appears right before you fight the actual Bowser. I don't know why this is here, but it's the only real thing of note. So yeah, the levels in this game flip-flop pretty frequently, and it's very mind-numbing. You go from having a really good and fun time to being about ready to give up on life. I'm starting to realize why people hate this game so much, actually. How about we talk about something that this game actually does right? And that is the introduction to the poison mushroom. Many point this beginning part of the game as a great showcase of how bad this game is, but the introduction is pretty great, all things considered. It shows you the real super mushroom in this box area here. So when you hit this block and see a purple mushroom come out, that should already be a red flag. Also, in the showcase of the game from the title screen, you get to see Mario die to the damn thing. Why would you think it's good? Even when I was a small toddler-brained little baby, I could figure out that the purple mushroom isn't a good thing to try and get. Little heated about that. But yeah, the introduction to the poison mushroom is really good, and the poison mushroom is actually a good inclusion to the game to add a level of difficulty to the game. Overall in this game, there aren't very many changes from the first, except the level designs, of course, but in terms of things being added, there's really only the poison mushroom, the wind mechanic, flying bloopers, and fake Bowser over here. I've already talked about almost all of these things as well, except the flying bloopers, and they're just flying bloopers. Bloopers in the air, that's all. That's one of the biggest problems with this game. It doesn't really have that much new things in it after the first game. However, there are things that it changed from the first game, such as the warp zones. The warp zones in the first game were just okay in my eyes. They really just let you skip through almost the entire game. That's pretty much it. Well, they fixed that in this game. Instead of having only 3 warp zones in only 2 levels, they put 8 warp zones in 5 levels. Many warp zones also have a lot of ways to get to them, such as in 3.1. You can either jump over the flagpole using this jumping board, or go through the first pipe of the level and go through an underground area to make it there. With this warp zone in particular taking you back to World 1. That's right, warp zones can take you backwards now, unless you want to kill yourself, that is. There are really only 2 warp zones that take you back to the beginning. Those are this one and the one in World 8. Where would you have thought the one in World 8 would have sent you if not backwards? All the others send you forward a little. Each warp zone only has 1 pipe in this game compared to the 3 of the last game's warp zones. I feel like this is the best way to have the warp zones. Some of them send you back, most are hidden apart from each other. and a lot are hidden in the exact same areas as others. For instance, 1-2 has 3, count 'em, 3 warp zones, each leading to one of the 4 upcoming worlds. Having a lot more warp zones can lead to people wanting to explore more and find new ones, instead of in the first game where it doesn't take too long to make it to both warp zones pretty quickly. This also prevents you from skipping like half of the game. Another thing this game does better than the first game is the underwater levels. The underwater levels in the first game are slow and boring and pretty much just copy-pasted layouts of each other. However, in this game, they aren't like that at all. They're actually really enjoyable to play through. I was genuinely shocked by it. They lasted a good amount of time, yet they don't overstay their welcome. The layouts are enjoyable to go through and make sense, and bloopers are fun to try and avoid due to the better layout of it. I was really surprised by these, and I feel they should be noted, considering how much I hated them in the past game. Truly proud they figured out how to make a good underwater level. However, they didn't fix every problem, obviously. It feels like they created more rather than fix the ones that were there. The number one problem I have is the castle levels. They still have the damn splitting pathways mechanic. If you are unaware of what I have deemed the splitting pathways mechanic, I feel so happy for you. So basically, the splitting pathways mechanic is where a castle level has multiple pathways, with multiple pathways after those pathways, and you have to pick these pathways in correct order, or you have to redo it again and again until you get it right. In the first game, they weren't that bad, I've realized. I still hated them, but I hate this so much more. These splitting pathways now have the element of difficulty. The first game didn't. So now it's harder to find the right path since you have to get past enemies too, and in general, it's so much longer than the ones in the first game. At a certain point, I just looked it up. I could not deal with another 10 minutes non-stop of just doing it again and again and again. It was agonizing. Hey, at least only 2 castle levels have them, much like the first game. Funny thing about the first game, actually, it technically has a post-game to it that I forgot to mention. Mainly because it's the exact same game, just a little bit more difficult here and there. It was really nothing special at all and hardly a reward for beating the game. This game also has a post-game link to it, however it is much different from the original game's post-game. Instead of just having to beat the game normally to get the post-game, you have to beat the game without going into any warp zones. Then after that you get access to beat World 9. It's almost all underwater and boring and not fun or interesting. It's really not worth it at all. Your reward for beating the game without skipping any of it is a crappy extra world that isn't even worth beating the game normally for, and pretty much just exists to congratulate you. Then there's more post-game that you can get. This one is gotten after you beat the game 8 times. Then you get access to World A through D, and they are not worth even one playthrough. They are just the base game levels made a little bit more difficult, and it's boring, agonizing even. At this point, you've beaten the game 8 whole times. Playing through more of the same is not a worthy reward at all. My mind was turning to brain rot at this point because I had to do it so many times. It was mind-numbing. You don't even understand how mind-numbing it was. I was pretty much on autopilot for the entire second half of playthroughs. And in the end, it was just not worth it at all. It was a waste of time at best, and at worst, it was the most annoying, mind-numbing waste of potential ever. I don't even want to explain any further. It was that bad. I feel completely murdered after that. I wasted so much of my time on that, and I don't feel accomplished in the slightest. And so that was Super Mario Bros. 2. It is one of the most painful games to play through, and the fact that you have to play through it 8 whole times to get the full post-game is just a kick in the balls at the very end of a beating. The tight and tricky jumps matched with the BS invisible blocks and the absolutely abhorrent level design in some cases. I see why people hate this game so much now. I thought people were over-exaggerating, that's what I said at the beginning. But I was so undoubtedly wrong. There are indeed some good parts to this game. I like a lot of what it does. A lot of the levels are really, really good and fun to play through. But it's just not worth it when you have to sift through so much garbage to make it there. I enjoyed this game more than the original Mario Bros. When I was a kid, and I can see why. I only made it to like World 3. The game up until that point is so much funner than the original to me, even now. However, the rest of the game is not worth the trouble, especially not 8 damn times. So much of this game is just awful jumps, invisible blocks, and pointless annoyances all the way through. Even the better levels that I mentioned, I have these issues with them. They have such good ideas that I thought the issues wouldn't have been as much of an issue with them. But I didn't enjoy playing through this game at all. The beginning was nice, but it went downhill ever since then. This game is not worth your time. Don't beat this game, and especially don't beat it 8 times. Just leave this game to die, please. I was hoping so badly that I would enjoy this game. Don't trust its looks. Truly don't. Don't think that this game will be fun. It won't. It isn't. Play any, and I mean any, other Mario game. It will be more worth your time than this one. Enjoy yourself, and don't be so naive like I was. Play Super Mario Bros. USA. It's not the true Super Mario Bros. Sequel, but it was made for a reason. Just don't play this game. It's not worth it, and if you do, play it on Switch Online like I did. Then you can rewind it. Ain't no way I was about to play this game without rewind. I knew that before I even realized it was such a god-awful game.
Guess which video I just finished? I did it. Wow. 6 months later, that was an adventure. So this is gonna be the last video I do in this style. Like, I'm not gonna stop like reviewing games or any of that. I'm gonna continue that, but instead I'm just gonna change practically everything else. So like the style of which it's edited, basically, because I do not like editing it the way that I have been. So, you know, yay. So we're starting next video that I make, which so far is looking to be 40 minutes. It's not Super Mario USA that I'm making next. Bye-bye. Bye.